The battlement was quiet. Like sentinels, each guard stood at attention, peering into the shadows of hill and tree. Eric walked the lines of men. He studied the worry, the anxiety, the fear held within each face. They tightened their jaw, sharpened their sights, and collected the adrenaline that would flow through them. When battle began, the surge would force them on. But no army waited within those trees. Not yet, he told the troops. But they will. Look sharp. And so they had done. Kallan should be in the stables soon. Eric entered the small stone passage of the battlement keep. He slipped down the steps to the courtyard, where the 2nd Battalion waited in the open air. The warriors shifted nervously. The night had a chill, but the tension was thick, filling each Dokafar with a raw angst that bound the nerves. The wind passed through the city with the taste of a sweet cold, as if it carried the morning dew of a distant land. Eric made his way across the courtyard and entered the corridor that would take him to the stables. Within the hall, the wind shifted, and a thick, warm air settled around him. Eric paused. Something wasn't right. The air was different. He reached with his scythe, touching the threads around him, and counted. Dagon behind. He must have followed. Kallan ahead. Liosifar. His heart eased, and he almost grinned when a ripple shook the strands of scythe. There was a change in the web that he knew sent his heart hammering. She's here. At once, Eric charged down the hall. Kallan! He called. He felt the pull on the scythe tighten. He turned the corner where Kallan came into sight. Beside her, the king looked as startled as she, and for a moment neither dared move. A second ripple shook the web, and just as Eric felt his foot leave the floor, he pulled in the scythe around him, throwing up a shield with it. The ripple became a solid pulse that struck the floor, throwing everything in the corridor to the air moments before Eric wrapped his scythe around Kallan, himself, and Rune. The pulse ejected them from the corridor into the stables, where they struck the stone hard. And then there was silence. Shaking off the stun that accompanied the blow, Eric pulled himself to his knees and froze when his eyes found Kallan. On the ground beside Rune she lay unmoving. Already the Liosifar was up, trying to raise her from the ground. A bit of blood seeped where her head had struck the stone, and Eric lunged. Dropping a hand to her brow, her scythe was strong, and he could heal her easily enough, but he couldn't afford her to wake. Not yet. She won't comply. She must stay asleep until she's gone. Take her, Eric said, not bothering to look up at Rune, although he could feel the questions he didn't ask. She lives. She's fine. This time Eric did look at Rune. But you must get her out of here. Why? There is no time. He was nearly done. Her wounds were closing fast, but the Liosifar king made no attempt to move from Kallan's side. Take a horse, Eric said, the brown Drishtia. He rides faster than the others. He could feel the moment slipping away. But I'm giving her to you. Now go, or you'll both be dead, Eric cried. She's Sitkona. When she wakes, Rune shook his head. I won't be able to hold her. Eric read the questions clear on Rune's face, and stared back with a look that asserted his warning. There was no time, no choice. Clasping his hand to Rune's wrist, Eric poured his scythe to the threads that slept within the Liosifar. There, where the energy coursed, Eric linked his scythe to Rune's and pushed the lines, coaxing them awake, forcing them through him until he reversed the flow of Rune's scythe. The Liosifar gasped and fell, catching himself on his palm so as not to fall on Kallan. Taking him by the shoulder, Eric shook Rune to attention. It's from the shock, Eric said. You'll get used to it. Now go! What did you do to me? Rune asked. I tethered your sleeping scythe to the shadow that lies in the bottommost depths of the abyss, far below under earth. His heart will be pounding like a state of berserk. His strength won't ebb. If anything, we'll have a constant surge of adrenaline without end. I saved your life, Eric said. Now get! At once Rune moved and took Kallan up from the floor with an ease that Eric could see came unnaturally to him. The Liosifar made his way to the saddled stallion and tossed Kallan onto the horse. Eric felt the seconds slip by, as if counting down the breaths to his timely death. I can't promise I'll be giving her back, Rune said, pulling himself into the horse. Don't bring her back here, Eric said. If she does, she'll die. Without question, Rune steered Astrid from the stall. And Liosifar, Eric said. Rune pulled back on the reins and gazed at Eric. Don't tell her about this, Eric said. She won't listen. She won't believe you. Without a word, Rune snapped the reins and followed the path out behind Leafspawn into the forest, allowing Eric a sigh that allowed him to breathe easy. Eric muttered a charm. The image of Borg that had masked his true appearance from the Liosifar king melted away just as the air went cold. The color drained from his face, sweat beaded upon his brow. He knew that prick to the back of his neck, the drug-like perfumes of under-earth. How now, sweet Eric, Fan's hot breath grazed his ear, and his chest tightened. "She's here," Fan hissed. Her voice spilled down his back like honey. "I can feel her. And you have fear." He could hear her breath drawing in his scent. "I can smell it." Her words slithered from her mouth, and Eric cringed when he felt the tips of her fingers graze his bare shoulders. "Stand back, witch!" he growled, and watched the black of her eyes dilate with prowess. "Where is she, Drui?" Fan asked. Eric clenched his jaw, loathing the word, and she smiled, delighted at her own cleverness. He mused. Fan repeated the word with a grin. "Drui." It rolled off her tongue. "She isn't here, Fan." The Fey goddess gave a plump pout that forced all his attention to her mouth. Her spells hung heavy in the air, and they worked to cloud his mind. "Not here?" she asked, feigning disappointment. "But I feel her. She's near. I didn't give her the tincture, Fan." Eric watched her performance change to rage as she abandoned her game. "I gave it to another." "She's gone, Fan." Hate tightened her face, and her chest rose and fell with increased breath. "Where?" she seethed. "Gunir." Spinning on the ball of her foot, Fan stopped toward the hidden passage. "You can't go, Fan!" Eric shouted as she moved her hand to transform, his words pulling her back. "The Liasifa have no Sade users. Their knowledge of the Sade is the same as men. You step 1 foot, new Gunir, and Danann will know." "Danann can detect the girl." "Danann doesn't know the girl exists," Eric said, knowing he had her. "Unless something such as the Fae approaches Kallan, Danann won't know." "You're out of options." Venom twisted her face, and she raised a hand filled with golden scythe. "You lay a hand on me, Fan!" Eric shouted over her threat. "Lay 1 finger! And then what? You have only a few more breaths before Danann finds you here." Fear stripped her rage, and he watched with satisfaction as she glanced at the runes that lined his chest. "You wouldn't," she said. "If it means Kallan will remain safe," Eric said, "I will undo the spells that bind my Sade, all so that Danann can find me. Kill me, and Danann will know." "What then, Fan? What will you tell her when she finds you've killed one of her precious Drui?" Fan twitched with the want to kill. He had her. "Danann doesn't forgive," he said. "You have no time." "There are other ways for me to find her," Fan said. "Others who will want what she has, so long as it isn't you." "If I find her, I promise there will be no prison that awaits her," Fan said. "I will kill her. Get in my way again, Drui, and I will kill you." Eric felt the fight in him rebound. The battle he thought he had won, he had only postponed. Her task having failed, she turned to leave when a step, too soft to be heard by most, earned the attention of the Drui and the goddess. There in the shadows the Dark One stood, his long sword poised, his dark eyes fixed on Fan with such loathing as to make Eric's blood turn cold. Fan smiled. Her eyes glistened with amusement, as if she had found a long-lost toy. "You!" Bergen snarled. "Bergen," she purred, grinning and studying him up and down with a look that made Eric's skin peel. Bergen's name in her mouth seemed only to darken Bergen's temper. "Fey whore," Bergen grumbled. "Still burning?" she asked. Bergen tightened his grasp on the hilt, catching a bit of light on the blade. Faint lines of gold glistened from beneath the folded black metal where Scythe composed its core. "Still have my sword, I see," Fan said. "Always in my grasp, Fey whore," Bergen said. Fan scoffed and turned her venom to Eric. "Drui," she said, bidding farewell. With a flick of her wrist, she contorted herself into a raven and flew from the stables out through the corridor, behind Bergen, and back to the courtyard in the sky. Eric leered at Bergen, who leered back while neither moved. "Go on, then," Eric said, indicating the passage, leading back to Leafspan in the wood. "Be long gone from here, I imagine." Eric felt the tension shift as Bergen increased his guard. "You're letting me go, just like that. Just like that." Neither man lowered his weapon. Eric assessed the Liasafar, whose alertness hadn't waned. Bergen took a step into the stables, and Eric mirrored his footwork. As Bergen shifted from the corridor, Eric slipped into the hall to leave Bergen's path clear, and both men with a safe amount of space between them. With nerves wrought high, and both men armed to attack, they stepped back, ensuring their eyes never left their opponent, until Eric was deep in the shadows of the corridor, and Bergen was several paces into the stables. Only then did Bergen turn and walk from the stables back to the Leafsfawn, his men, and the wood. Eric drew a deep breath. The adrenaline still ran its course, leaving his awareness peaked. One less end to tie up. He made his way down the corridor, ignoring the fractures in the stone from Fan's blast. From the hall, he could see the many dead that lay there, dead or dying from the force of the save Fan had brought down from under earth. Had Gudrun not drunk the tincture, she would have seen all of this. Had Gudrun not drunk the tincture, she too would be dead. Eric stopped at the heap that was Dagon's body, crumpled against the stone wall that made up the arched entrance to the great hall. Despite his proximity to the blast, which had thrown him into the arch, it very well saved him from the bulk of the blast and from death. Eric placed a hand to his burnt brow. His scythe was there but faint, and Eric at once set to work, muttering the charms he learned a lifetime ago. Just enough to keep him alive for Gudrun, and... Eric deepened his scythe and muttered beneath his breath, "All I need now is a witness."